Hey there, my name is Porsha Lauri. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. And today we are officially starting spooky season, as you can tell by my primo set dressings. But last year for spooky season, one of my favorite videos that I've posted, actually per my entire channel, one of my favorite videos I've ever made was my Let's Chat Final Girls, which we deep dived into the trope of the final girl and kind of dissected where that trope came from and kind of the modernization of final girls and if they still exist today in horror movies. You guys really seem to like that. I got a lot of really positive comments on that video. I did ask you at the beginning of the year if you guys would like more videos like that, and unfortunately I haven't been able to do as many of them as I would have liked. The Final Girls video from last year was heavily researched. I started working on that video in June, and so I had a lot of time to put it together. And this year, between work and just, I don't know, life, I just haven't been able to make something quite like that since. But I'm hoping today's video is kind of in the same air as the Final Girls trope video. With that being said, today's topic is kind of another deep dive. This time we are diving into the based on a true story trope, or cliche, if you will. As always, if you enjoy my opinion on all things pop culture, movies, music, TV shows, what have you, do me a solid and drop a like on this video, then run over to that subscribe button, hit the bell next to it, so you can be notified every time I upload. I don't really have much of an intro for this video, so let's just go ahead and jump into it. So we're going to be exploring the world of movies that are based on a true story. Since it is Spooktober, see, I'm gonna keep sneaking the word spooky in as many times as I can. But this trope is spread across many genres. You will not find this within just horror movies per se, which is different than The Final Girl, which really is specific to horror movies only. But let's talk a little bit more about what is a based on a true story trope mean. I'm probably going to be referring to this trope as boats for the remainder of the video, or interchangeably. So we can actually mark this trope going back all the way to 1876, when Frankenstein author Mary Shelley released a book called The Last Man, which was a horror book that was using found manuscripts adapted from a real life story. I believe this was a relatively popular way to release books back in the day. This book is entirely made of firsthand accounts, news articles written about it, and interviewing people who were around the situation. So by using the tactic of boats, you are destabilizing and changing the reality of the audience that is watching the movie. I found that this trope is extremely popular in the paranormal department specifically. I think because any kind of paranormal activity has almost zero facts behind it. You're being told that everything that you're seeing is based on some sort of fact or truth. So it's a lot easier to get lost in the fantasy and start to believe that these kind of occurrences are maybe normal, or at least they really did happen in real life at one point in time. The downside is that the reactions that many survivors of these specific scenarios, stories, may have adverse or negative reactions to the story that's being told on screen. Because you can take creative liberties with their story, you now can create a world and a scenario that absolutely is not based on any fact. And because movies are movies and they are supposed to be a creative expression, this leaves the door open for directors, writers, producers to create bigger scenarios, to create a fantasy, a reality of their own making, while still claiming that all of these events are true, which can put the audience in a disadvantage to feel as though they can believe everything that they're being told, when in reality, the actual story is probably this big, whereas the creative liberties are this big. Another element that seems to coincide very much with boats is the element of found footage. Now, this is something that we definitely see primarily in the horror movie genre. However, I have seen this outside of it. But found footage is typically added into the film to create a sense of urgency and realness, to provide further backing that this is a real, true story. Because look, here's the footage of what really happened. And I think something that audiences only after the 2000s were really able to verify is that a lot of this found footage is not actual found footage. It's just another cinematic creation. But the found footage element can add some level of legitimacy, allows the audience to really get lost into the story. So what are some of the characteristics that create a boats story? Something that really coincides with boats is using the old archival footage, first-person POV accounts, or newspaper clippings, old photos. I think you can't have a based on a true story trope without having the title card that tells you, hey, this is based on a true story. Another element they might use is using real names of real victims and or survivors. And even if they don't portray them as they are in real life, because you've attached a real name, a real location to the settings, people will be like, oh, I know that town, or I know that state, or I've heard of that before. It's not some made up reality. It feels like it's really being put in your backyard. Again, there's a lot of POV visuals. So whether that's like the shaky cam we get in movies like Blair Witch Project or Cloverfield, I think one of the most important parts of making a boats movie is the promotion, whether that be showing documentaries leading up to the release of the film. That can also be creating websites with fake articles and stories and first-hand witness accounts. So those are some characteristics of boat movies. So now it's time to get into my favorite part of researching this video, the different false claims and lawsuits that arose out of some of these movies. First, let's talk about Amityville. Amityville, I was surprised to read how many different lawsuits and different situations arose out of those movies. The police claim that they were never called, and neighbors say no strange behavior was noticeable. The Lutz family was sued by the owners of the home after their departure for defamation and fraud. George and Kathy Lutz, the mom and dad of the Lutz family, filed a lawsuit against William Weber, the defense lawyer for Ronald DeFeo Jr. at his trial, Paul Hoffman, a writer working on an account of the hauntings, Bernard Burton and Frederick Mars, both alleged clairvoyants who had examined the house, along with Good Housekeeping magazine, the New York Sunday News, and the Hearst Corporation, alleging misappropriation of names for trade purposes, invasion of privacy, and mental distress. The Lutz family was also then sued by the owners of the home for defamation and fraud for obviously conveying that this house was haunted, which I'm sure from a reselling point of view really hurt the sale of this home and probably financially kind of ruined them, I would imagine. These claims that George and Kathy had filed against all of these people and different companies were ultimately thrown out of court. I couldn't find anything to say if they exactly ever came to a conclusion on the matters, and it does seem as though some of them were settled out of court. William Weber, the defense attorney for Ronald DeFeo Jr., claims that the entire book story was created by the Lutzes over several bottles of wine alongside himself. There's not a ton of information about this online, so that's still debatable. Couldn't find anything to say 100% whether it was one way or the other. I thought it was something very important to notice about the film. Let's move on to The Conjuring, which has slightly less controversy. The current resident sued New Line Cinema for the invasion of privacy as well as the amount of security systems she needed after the release of the movie The Conjuring. It makes a lot of sense that The Conjuring got in a lot of trouble because this is based on a real location, a real house, and I'm sure that this lady who owns the house now and these days is probably incredibly regretful about this purchase. She has to have a constant influx of people trying to visit and look at the house and explore the house and ask her about hauntings and I'm sure that has created a whole different level of notoriety that she probably didn't want. I live in Oregon, so a popular filming destination that people want to go see out here is the Goonies house. And the owners of the Goonies house had actually for a while, and I believe this is no more, but I don't think you can just like go easily check out the house. But they had put up tarps and they had no trespasser signs, and they hated people coming out to view this home. And that's the Goonies house. The Goonies came out in the 80s. If people are still bothering these people enough that they felt that they needed to put up tarps so that people couldn't even see the house, how do you think the Conjuring house does at this time of year? And I believe that this was a situation that was settled out of court. So it's not that she won her case, but they basically gave her some money and asked her to be quiet about it. New Line Cinema was also sued by a writer who claims that he owned the rights to Ed and Lorraine's case files and found that New Line Cinema creating this movie infringed on that right. This was completely tossed out of court because this was actually turned out to be completely fake. From all my research, I couldn't find if there were more lawsuits about The Conjuring, but from what I understand, a lot of the community where The Conjuring takes place, wherever that home is, were very upset by the new influx of fame that this area has. And finally, the fourth kind. Universal set up a website for the promotion of the film that included information on real missing people and cited real sources in Alaska to back up their boat's claims. Some Alaska publishers got together and sued Universal. It was settled out of court and Universal was required to remove the website. And a popular note about movies of this time is that they really tried to dig from real lived experiences, documented experiences of people being haunted or abducted by aliens or whatever the case may be. The fourth kind, I feel like, took all of these tropes that were extremely popular in the genre and ran with it, without actually having a true story to base it on. I could kind of overlook how ridiculously not real this is, but it's the fact that they had this opener with Milla Jovovich and what she's saying in the opener.
I am actress Milla Jovovich, and I will be portraying Dr. Abigail Tyler in The Fourth Kind. Better explain the events of the story, the director has included actual archived footage throughout the film. Every dramatized scene in this movie is supported by either archived audio, video, or as it was related by Dr. Tyler during extensive interviews with the director.
Claiming that they had documentary footage. They had a website backing up all of these claims. It's an extremely poor taste to find out after the fact that they also included real cases of real people going missing, and they just thought nothing of that. They were just like, oh, we can just use their information to support our silly little horror movie. I was really glad to read that they actually ended up being sued over that. I don't like being lied to. Like, just tell me, like, it's a movie. That's totally fine too. I will accept it at face value. This is a movie. It's a fantasy. It doesn't have to be real. And if it is going to be real, then I think the survivors of the situation, whomever they should be, should have a say in how it's portrayed. Which also kind of leads me into another thing that I've seen circulating the internet a lot lately, especially in the last couple of weeks. And I believe this is due to the new Dahmer TV show that is currently streaming on Netflix. And keep in mind, this is my channel. These are my opinions. You don't have to agree with me, and my word is not the law. So if you disagree with everything I have to say, totally fine. There's been a lot of chatter about true crime, the popularity of true crime, and kind of where the line is being okay for consumption versus things that maybe we should stop consuming. But I thought about this in terms of actually a non-horror related thing. So I watched Pam and Tommy, and I really enjoyed the show. My boyfriend and I watched it together. We watched the whole series, and we found it enjoyable, entertaining. I like to heavily research whatever I'm currently interested in. So the moment I finished Pam and Tommy, I started researching in to understand more of what was going on at that time. Cut to me finding interviews, because of course my next thought is well, what did Pam and Tommy have to say about this, and were they involved in the making of the show? Tommy was slightly helpful. He at least talked to the guy who plays him in the movie to kind of give him, I think, an idea of who he was at that time. However, Pamela was not at all interested in being a part of the show. In fact, She found the show to be really degrading. She didn't watch the show at all, and she really didn't want to revisit this time in her life because it was so hard. So to find out all of that, to know that also the creators of the show, which does include my boy Seth Rogen, I'm not canceling anyone over this. I'm just sharing my 2 cents. So don't make this like I hate all of these people now for making this show. But finding out that she didn't want this show to be made from the jump, that she wasn't interested in having any kind of part of it, made me rethink, should the show have ever been made to begin with then, if it didn't have the consent of the survivors of the incident? And 2, am I wrong for consuming this media? And so after reading all of this information about Pamela Anderson, how she felt about the show, I felt really indifferent about being someone who watched the show without really understanding all of this subtext that was going on behind the scenes. After thinking about this for a while, I was like, wow, like I really didn't really think that hard about the media I'm consuming, because to me it's like I'm in control of how I react to it, right? But I didn't know how to reconcile with the fact that like, well, I've already watched it, I can't unwatch it now. But it also led me to start thinking about other true crime scenarios that I've willingly like bought into that might be harmful to the survivors or victims of the situation. So, for example, I watched The Girl from Plainview, and I thought the show was actually really interesting. I thought it was well acted. Really enjoyed Elle Fanning's work on the show. I thought she was very convincing. Like, if you really think about it, almost the entire show is made up and a fantasy idea of what we think may have been going on in that girl's head. But in actuality, it's not based on really facts. I think that there was enough information from the case to kind of create a character around that. However, when it comes to the girl from Plainview, Elle Fanning's character, she never opened up to anyone. She never testified during the trial. She didn't do interviews afterwards. She has since been released, and she's still not talking to any press. She's not taking the story public. So that means all of these scenes that show what she was doing during this texting time and the kind of inner dialogue and fantasy that she had, all the stuff about Glee, it's an imagining of what they think she was thinking about, but it has no real basis in reality. And yeah, I think the TV show makes it pretty clear that she was in the wrong, but also it does this thing where it tries to give her almost a redemption arc and doesn't really fully show what the reality of the situation was. The intensity of that didn't really come across. And I'm not saying that you can't have compassion for her. I have compassion for her. I think that she was a sick teenager that needed help and someone to listen to her, but that doesn't negate the fact that she had a hand in someone's death. So again, I had to come to this realization of like, is this okay content for anyone to consume? So I leave the question to you guys. What do you guys think about that? True crime, is there a line? Is it okay to keep creating these movies and TV shows where the focus isn't like the investigation and how they caught the person, which I think is wildly more interesting, but to have them based on the perpetrator of the crimes? It's almost always done in a way that creates a sympathetic portrayal of a person who's probably committed some of the worst crimes. This has been happening for a long time. It's not like this rise in true crime content is really that new. I think people have always had a slight obsession with true crime, and we've been documenting these stories in TV and movies for years and years and years. I think it's only recently that the public consciousness has been like, hey, maybe this isn't a good thing. To give you more examples, I also watched the Bundy movie with Zac Efron. And I do have to say, I'm extremely biased because I'm a huge Zac Efron fan. But I really do have to look at this and wonder, was this an okay movie to be made? And I know there was a lot of controversy leading into that movie. Didn't show you the murders. They alluded to them and they talked kind of around them, about them, but it was mostly regarding the people that were around him, how they interacted with him, and how he flew under the radar for so long. And I think at the end of the movie is the only time that we almost get a real kill scene from like what he was really doing in that time, but it cuts away. And I thought that that was kind of important because we don't need to focus on the most grotesque parts of the case. So I don't know. I guess I'm trying to show that as an example of like, I thought this was a better portrayal because of these reasons, but maybe it's in the same category as all these other ones. So I leave that question to you guys. What do you guys think about that? And like I said, I'm not here to tell you that you're wrong about anything. I'm also asking the question like, am I wrong about this? But I just want to have an understanding of where other people are coming from in regards to this situation. Just to like kind of wrap this part up so we can get back to our boats topic. But I do think that there is a place in media to showcase these true crimes in an entertaining way. But I do think there are positive ways to do true crime. I also think you can do it like, I haven't watched this movie entirely, so like if this doesn't actually fit, please let me know in the comments. But like the Zodiac movie, I feel like that is more focused on the investigators and journalists that were following the case and less about the actual murderer and like whatever his storyline is. Especially since the Zodiac has never been solved. I'm pretty sure this is more about the other side of it. I think those kind of scenarios are still welcome. I think those are positive true crime media iterations. So I don't know, but tell me what you guys think in the comments. What do you think about true crime media and where it's at today? And for these based on a true story movies that I've been talking about, do you think that they fall into this category of being somewhat inappropriate and hurtful to survivors, victims, people who are a part of the story? Let me know. That was quite a tangent. So I just kind of want to wrap up this video with giving you my 2 cents on boats and why this trope I think is more problematic than it is worth continuing. I have very conflicting views on the use of this byline as a means to draw audiences. While I don't see a problem with bringing real life stories to screen, what I do have a problem with is when we utilize someone's life story to sell tickets and exploit their experiences and trivialize them to fit the narrative of a story that the production company wants to tell. Take a movie like Scream, which is lightly based on true events, but it doesn't include any exact information from the real life crime, nor does it paint itself as if it's a true to life story. They make many references to this actually being a movie and following standard horror movie guidelines. I also think that movies that lift characteristics of a real-life serial killer, such as Ed Gein's obsession with his mother that they used as inspiration for Psycho, or how he handled body parts like in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, are far less devaluing and shine a light on certain topics without being a direct adaptation. This byline can get really complicated when the characters are portrayed in a way that is not factual, or it gives redemption arcs to villainous characters in an attempt to humanize them instead of telling it more like it is. This treatment happens more when the main character is a serial killer. This can result in minimizing their actual actions and denying survivors their actual lived experiences. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the boats trope and a little bit of my thoughts on where true crime media is today. So let me know your thoughts and opinions down below. Do you enjoy when a horror movie uses the term based on a true story? What are some accounts of movies that you thought were 100% true only to grow up to find that they are not even remotely true? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down below. Like I said, these are just my opinions. These are not law, these are not facts. So please feel free to throw in your 2 cents. If you completely disagree, that's okay too. I just want to talk about it. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave me a like. And if you enjoy my opinion on all things horror movies and tropes, do me a solid and hit that subscribe button as well as the bell next to it so you can be notified every time I upload. I hope you guys have an excellent October and Halloween, and I will catch you guys next time. Bye!